All right, good evening, folks, and welcome to the November edition of the Astroimaging Special Interest Group. As we've been doing for the past 6 months or so, we're going to spend the first few minutes as a beginner's corner. If we have any folks this is your first meeting or you haven't introduced yourself before, please feel free to do so now.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Charlie Hagan. It's my first ASIG meeting, or what do you guys call it here? It's the AISIG, Astroimaging Special Interest Group.
ASIG is good.
Okay,
welcome,
gotcha.
Charlie.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I've been a member for a little over a year and a half now. Finally making it to a meeting.
My name's Werner Krobig, and I'm pretty new. I think this is only the second meeting I've been to, and I've been doing this hobby for, I don't know, 3 months now.
Okay, welcome aboard.
Thanks.
My name is Gina Knight, and this is my first meeting, and I was really delighted to find out there's a special interest group. So looking forward to learning from y'all.
Welcome, Gina.
How long have you been involved in the hobby, Gina?
A year and a half.
Welcome.
Thanks.
All right, looks like we've got a few new members. That's always a good sign. Any folks have any what we would consider beginners questions? And of course, Jeff is our judge on that. If he thinks it's not a beginner, he's going to bounce you, but go ahead and ask your questions.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
I've got a question. I'm not sure if it qualifies as a beginner's question, but it's an issue that I and a couple other people have been having with the most recent bill of PixInsight. Now, I don't know if it belongs at this venue or I should take it offline with other people. But there seems to be an issue with WBPP, trying to process a lot of subs. I think the best thing to show you my example is to just share my screen real quickly, and I'll show you a couple of quick shots that we can discuss it if everyone's got some solutions. Does that make sense?
Okay, do it quick.
All right. If this is not the right venue, we can take it off.
We don't want to, we don't want to spend too much time on it, but let's identify the problem.
Okay, so let's see if I can share this. All right, so
is this Windows or a Mac?
It's a Mac. All right, that's maybe part of the problem. So I was everyone can see this?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So I ran this question by Doug a couple of weeks ago. He wasn't sure what the answer was. He thought maybe it was a software problem. He suggested I talk to Alan Rockowitz, who's also a Mac user. But as you can see here, I was processing 197 subs, and it failed at the reference generation operation. I thought it's strange, never happened before. It just started happening, and it happened 2 other times with a bunch of other subs. Let me close this one.
And it's worth noting that it said 0 milliseconds spent on that reference frame, so it crashed as soon as it started that step.
I ran it again, and it solved the problem. Okay, it did not stop and fail. Now,
without changing any settings?
Without changing any settings. Let me show you both slides together here. I don't know if you can see these, but basically, I ran it by the PI forum as well, and they didn't know what to look at anyway. The only thing I noticed was that the reference frame selection in the fail one took 10 milliseconds, and in the one that passed was 41 milliseconds. So I thought there might be some kind of correlation. I did this with 2 other sets of subs with the same exact failure and success rate. So one of the
it fails once and then it works the second time?
Exactly. So one thing that one of the guys from PI, an expert, suggested was that if I go to the local normalization screen, the setting here, maximum integrated frames 5, it was set for 20, was a default. It says change it to 5 and see what happens. So I changed it to 5 instead of 20, and the problem never occurred again. So the question, whether you call it a newbie question or not, is why bad frame rejection didn't happen, doesn't happen all the time? Why is it does it depend on how many frames you're looking at? And also, how can you manually select good frames? I did a blink, they all look great. The guiding was great. It's just very confusing to me on how to stop this from happening again. As you can imagine, if I was doing 2 drizzle, I'd be here 4 hours before I figured out what was going on.
It always happened in local normalization.
That's when the failure was happening, it looks like.
And why, maybe the other question is, why do you run local normalization? I skipped running it because I was having some of the same issues.
Okay.
And then I started reading up about it, and there's a lot of posts about, you don't, about not running it, basically. And I don't remember, because this goes quite a ways back, and I don't run it anymore unless I've got nights of, varying illumination, varying sky background.
Yeah.
I just let it rip without local normalization.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, if I use the fast batch processing, it never fails. And even the quote unquote expert on PI forum said, well, doesn't fastback also do local normalization? I said to him, no, it doesn't. So to me, this whole thing was very, confusing. And more importantly, this has only come up in the last build. The previous, we never had an issue like this.
I hope you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I'm on a Mac as well. And it actually happened with me when I had about 300 frames. So quite a large amount of data. I don't do local normalization for like Ed said, because I didn't find any benefit. It takes just extra amount of time, and I tried it out both ways. And I also noticed that if I clear out memory and cache, I don't have crashes. I don't have these kind of failures anymore. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So you try to quit your applications that you're not using, and PixInsight was fine.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
if I choose fast batch, everything completes in about 20 minutes. I'm not sure I can tell
does.
what difference.
Yeah.
quite
Yeah,
frankly.
there is a difference in WBPP and fast batch. Yeah.
I'd like to
Just
know something.
for point of information,
I'm sorry.
I was good just as a point of information. I've experienced the same thing, and I'm using Windows.
Okay. Well. Yeah.
I had this problem just trying to process a while back, trying to process globular cluster images. And it seemed that if it was a field of all stars, it did that same thing where it failed. Or sometimes what it would give me is a map rather than an image. And even on one occasion, it also gave me a negative image. It was giving me all kinds of nutty stuff. And I never could figure out what it was. But there seemed to have been a glitch in I've since gotten an updated version of PixInsight. And recently I processed 2 sets of globular cluster subframes, and it came out just fine. In fact, they came out spectacular. I did one of M5 a while back, and then more recently M15. But
Thanks, Paul. This seems like a good topic and a good opportunity to put in a plug for the Discord channel that we have created specifically for deep dives into topics. It's a chat board, more of a real-time chat. You can get notices of it. If you would like to join the Discord channel, just send me a message and I'll send you an invite. But the goal is to create a place where we can go down rabbit holes and continue to try to unpack questions like this without having to hijack the whole forum.
Yeah, okay.
So, but why don't we move that discussion over to the Discord channel?
Okay.
All right, Ryan, send me a note so that I've got your full name. You can do it through Groups.io.
Yeah, and just so you know, I have a Mac and I've never had that issue. I've had issues before if I try to rerun WPPP and haven't gotten rid of the junk that it creates in your folder if I'm using the same folder, and I try to clear out the cache whenever I can, but I've never had an issue like that.
And for those of you who are asking, I will post the Discord a Discord link in Groups.io. I think that will work. We don't have to do it one-on-one. So look for that after the meeting.
All right, any other basic questions?
2 quick public service announcements.
Okay,
The 2024 astrophotography contest is a month away from the deadline. Just as a reminder, we have 3 categories: nightscapes, solar system, and deep sky. You can submit 1 entry in each of those categories. We have a group of distinguished judges, of which I am not one, but I am the administrator for the contest. The images will be judged blindly. You can find the details on the website. There are several. If you just search the word contest in the Groups.io in the forum, there are a variety of links to the webpage where we have all the rules and procedures for the contest. We have a relatively small number of entries so far, so send them in so I can get them uploaded. We will have a prize. We'll name first, second, and third place finishers in each of the 3 categories. First place finishers will receive a $100 gift certificate courtesy of Starizona. So that's public service announcement number 1. The other one is a reminder, particularly for some of our new members in the meeting tonight. We have established a mentoring program, and if you go to the TAAA ASIG page, you can find the details about that. So if you would like to have a formal mentor, formal, it's still informal, but if you would like someone who will work with you from time to time, answer your questions, look at your images, help you with your rig, send us a note and we'll be happy to match you up with somebody who we think can be most helpful.
all right.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff and David, are you ready to tell us what to do?
We are ready.
Yes.
So let me share my screen. Okay. Are you able to see that in the full screen mode?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And as a test, do you see a new slide there and back and forth?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So welcome everybody and thanks for joining us. You may recall we did a survey recently to gather data about what platforms everybody uses for imaging, processing, and so on. And you're looking at the logos of the number 1 and number 2 image capture platforms that we as a group use. As might be expected in a club that is in the same town as Starizona, where they love the ASIAir. The ASIAir is by far the most commonly used capture platform. And then Nina is the next one. So what we wanted to do, I'm a Nina user. Dave is an ASIAir user. We want to give you an overview of these 2 platforms. This is not in-depth training. We're not going down any rabbit holes. You're not going to see everything about either platform. We just want to give you a sense of at a high level, how do they look one to the other? This is not a debate also over whether one is better than the other. These are different tools for different needs. Both have strengths, both have weaknesses. And when you're making a selection of a imaging control platform, you got to match your needs and desires up with the available products. So we're going to tell you what, at a high level, these platforms do. We're going to tell you why we made our respective choices. We're going to share pros and cons, and we're going to give you an overview of key features. We ask that you hold questions until the end. Dave and I have both set up, have turned on our systems. They're both indoors, so we're not going to be pointing at anything. But we can share screens and look in real time at both platforms if there's a question that we haven't answered with the PowerPoint slides. And by saving questions to the end, we minimize the jumping around of screens. With that, let's get started. And Dave, over to you.
Okay, great. So a little background. In January, it will be my 2-year anniversary into astro imaging. Actually, technically January 21st, when I shot my first set of images at the Arizona parking lot. And I went into this hobby not knowing anything about it. I went to a TAA Pima County event prior to acquiring my rig. And I'm not sure who it was. Maybe it was Craig, maybe it was Randy, I'm not sure who, but somebody had a Red Cat 51 with an ASIAir hooked up, and then they had a iPad, and they were showing everybody how they could capture M42 using a stack type imaging session, and it looked really cool. I never heard of the ASIAir until then. So when I went to Arizona, I told them, configure me a system that's easy to use so I don't have to worry about selling it 6 months later once I acquire everything. So they recommended the ASIAir. Basically what the ASIAir is, it's an all-in-one appliance. So it contains the hardware and the software to run your system. It's like a smart telescope for an advanced rig. It's probably the best way to describe it. And it doesn't require any specific platform. It runs on iOS as well as other devices that are, Windows-based devices, or it could be running on a, I forgot the term for it, but it's a mobile device, an Android device. So Android and iOS is where it really runs. And here's what it really does. It connects and powers your devices. So here are the 4 power ports you can hook up. And on the left side, the front-facing side, it has some 4 USB ports as well. 2 of them are for video or cameras. They're higher speed USB-C type devices. And then you have your USB B devices for non-video type things. It allows you to do your polar alignment without a polar scope. So as long as your system or your rig is facing relatively north, it could do a polar alignment for you. It takes care of the focusing for you. And the important thing to note is that as the temperatures change throughout the night of imaging, that can affect your focus. So this will automatically do it for you. It aids you in target selection. As you can see on the top screen, here it's showing you a guide of tonight's best. So you can actually preview what's out there in the night sky, determine which one you want to select. It gives you a little picture, web-sized picture of the object. It shows you where it is in the horizon throughout the night. And then it even shows you the direction that it's facing. So you can determine whether it's something that you want to actually image. It also provides auto guiding. So if you have a guide scope and a guide camera of some sort, it'll allow you to do auto guiding. And it also allows you to determine, which images you want to shoot, when you want to shoot them, what exposure settings and stuff like that we'll get into later. So it really does everything for you. And for me, it was a very easy choice because I run a Mac. I didn't want to have to buy a Windows computer to run it. And I wanted something that was simple yet that would do everything I wanted to do.
So Nina, the fundamental difference between Nina and the ASIAir is that Nina controls any ASCOM compatible hardware. It is not, you're not limited to any particular brand of any particular product. It enables full, it enables full observatory automation. So camera, filter wheel, focuser, rotator, mount, guider, switch, flat panel, weather sensor, dome, and safety sensor can all, as long as they're ASCOM compatible, can be controlled with Nina. It is it's a program, but it's also a platform for plugins. People write.
You'd love that bookstore, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Sorry, could you mute your speakers? Hey, folks, could you mute your microphones, please?
Behind the door. He said he was waiting for Dogi to come back and tell him the show was over.
Hey, Greg, can you
Vance,
put everybody else
mute
on
your-
mute?
Like, Clint was the only one who knew Dogi took his place during the performance.
Greg, you can mute them.
Yeah, Greg, can you mute the other voices?
You don't even look closely.
Gets back up on his horse. It's like going to the west.
That's what he told me.
What else did you see?
Sounds like a television.
Yeah.
All right. I think we got it. So this is free open source software. Various amateurs who are also programmers.
If you ever want to go to high school, I'll give you an excellent reference.
And give up the excitement of life as a bookseller?
Can we tell where most people are muted?
It's Vance.
You've convinced me that Clint didn't kill Dogi.
I have to change.
You can tell who it is?
Yeah, it's Vance.
What? Vance, can you stop the noise?
He's muted now.
All right. Various programmers have written, call them apps. Nina calls them plugins, which perform specific functions that Nina does not. For example, one astrophysics, I have an astrophysics mount. Someone wrote a plugin that integrates the astrophysics software into Nina. Someone wrote a filter offset calculator. So you run through a sequence measuring the difference in focus position for your various filters so that you don't have to refocus every time you change a filter. And one of my personal favorites, someone wrote a remote copy plugin that's based on Windows Robocopy, so that as images are captured on my little mount side computer, they are transmitted over the network to my main computer here in my office. So in the morning, I don't have to move a memory card or anything. All my images are already loaded on my processing computer. The core of it, and this is what I'm showing in the picture, is a powerful drag and drop sequence creator. You ask yourself, what's the first thing I want to do? You drag that command over. What's the next thing I want to do? And you drag that command over. But most of these commands are configurable in various ways. There are tools that allow you to create if-then loops, time-based sequences, altitude-based sequences. You image until the object descends to 45 degrees altitude, things like that. Very powerful, almost like its own, becoming like its own programming language. And I am not a programmer. I was a lawyer, so we're not allowed to do both. It integrates seamlessly with PhD2, Stellarium, and Carte du Ciel. And here you've got, it's as if PhD2 is part of the program. You click the button, PhD2 launches, you've got everything that PhD2 can do. And Stellarium is also, and Carte du Ciel are both integrated, so you can click an object in the planetarium program, and Nina will cause the computer, the mount to slew to that point, or to incorporate it into an image sequence. It is highly customizable. That gray and red color scheme you see can be changed to an infinite number of color patterns. What tools are visible on various screens at any time? You can add, subtract, turn things on, turn things off. And you can drag the layout around, make certain boxes bigger and certain boxes smaller. So overall, a very powerful tool. Dave, you started, but why don't you continue on why you chose the Air?
Yeah, I just wanted something that was simple, that easy to use, so that I wouldn't have to do a lot of detail configurations or anything else. I just wanted something that would work. And frankly, I was so new to the hobby, I didn't even know what Nina was or SharpCap or any other programs. So something was easy to use, Mac and iPhone compatible. That was important to me. Does not require the use of Windows. I didn't have to buy an additional computer. Worked fine with my system. Although they do have an app that I've also can use on my Mac if I wanted to run it from my computer, but typically I'm just using my iPhone. It works with the cameras that I use, which are ZWO cameras, um, electronic autofocus that I have from ZWO that's also connected to my C8, and also works with my AVX mount. So for my particular rig, everything worked. And also the fact that the Wi-Fi works directly peer-to-peer if I want, but I can also use it, and what I use it currently here is in station mode, so I can use my home Wi-Fi. So no matter where I am in the house, I can use it on my phone, on my iPad, on my computer, and I don't have any issues with it disconnecting.
And for Nina, I went to Starizona when I was beginning this hobby, and they said, buy an ASIAir, and they explained I needed to use the ZWO autofocuser. I have a 20-year-old telescope, and the autofocuser bracket was not compatible with my focuser. I know now I could have had Starizona machine a custom bracket, but I didn't know it at the time. So I said, all right, fine, I can't use the Air, and I went around looking for something else. I find Nina logical and intuitive. There's a lot of content there. And I like tweaking things. I like diving down rabbit holes. I like the fact that I will never outgrow this program, even if I built my own observatory. I don't think I would ever have to use something else. And at least compared to Sequence Generator Pro and the other Max and the other programs for capturing images, the price was right. Nina is free. But as I note here, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. I needed a computer to run it on. I wound up wanting a USB and power distributor box. I bought a Pegasus power box for the top of my rig. And all of that is in the ASIAir. So from a value standpoint, I think the ASIAir is the better value. If you can use it, and if you're willing to live within the ZWO Club Red ecosystem. Dave, pros and cons. Start with the Air.
Sure. Well, it's a very user-friendly interface. It has a lot of capabilities, but it's designed to be easy to use from the standpoint of the platform you're using it with, which is usually a mobile device like the iPhone, for example. So there are options, but they're not all on one screen like Nina. Typically, it's designed to be there are sub-menus and nested menus that you can get to throughout the app. And there are other ways of getting to certain types of advanced features, but they're not all on the iPhone just because you don't have the real estate on the screen to do that. But it took me a while to figure it out. I mean, anything that's new takes a while, but it seemed to be extremely user-friendly to me, at least, and it still is. Very easy to configure. And again, I use ZWO cameras, a ZWO autofocuser, and I don't use an electronic filter wheel now, but if I ever go to a mono setup where that would be required, the ZWO EFW is compatible. I think if I went to another brand, it probably wouldn't be. But as long as you like the products and they fit within your budget and what you want to accomplish, then it works fine. But again, there are restrictions.
I use ZWO cameras. I have a ZWO filter wheel, and I think they're excellent products. Nina, when you think that because it supports all ASCOM compatible equipment, it means you have to configure stuff. You know, the ZWO people know how many microns each step of their electronic filter wheel turns with each click of the motor. With Nina, you have to configure it because you might be using a Pegasus or an Optec or who knows what kind of autofocuser, and you've got to figure it out. So there's a learning curve. I find it pretty intuitive, and there are lots of great resources online, and a decent number of people here in our group who can advise on it. But you know, I show highly configurable is both a pro in green and a con in red. Every little box means there's an opportunity to check it wrong or put the wrong number in there and have things not work. So there are certainly more opportunities to go wrong with Nina, and trust me, I've done many of them. I think than there are with the Air. Nina continues to undergo rapid development. There's a very active team that the sequencer that I showed a picture of before, we'll talk about later, has only been around for about a year. And they have made dramatic improvements to it. So it is constantly being updated. I do find, and you'll see from the screens, it is a less elegant user interface, just lots of little rows with checkboxes and boxes you can put numbers into. And it is way more complex than the Air.
Okay,
so
so
now
let's
we're going to run through some specific features of just kind of what does it look like when you're doing some of these things in the two platforms. So polar alignment.
Yeah, so for polar alignment, it's really fairly easy. Once you figure out how to get everything to work, and I will share a little story with you. The first night I tried to use this rig, when I finally had a clear night to work with, I set up everything on my mount. I had the Hyperstar set up. I had my camera set up. My C8 was set up on the mount properly. And I connected the AVX mount, which I continue to use today, to the actual ASIAir through its USB cable. And then I spent a good part of the night trying to figure out why I couldn't polar align. And then I was reading on a forum and I found out that had I just selected Quick Sync on the keypad of my mount, it would have solved all my problems. So if you're thinking of going to an ASIair and you're using an AVX mount, and I'm not sure if this applies to other mounts, use Quick Sync and you'll be able to polar align. That was the only thing that was holding me back. Now, you used to have to do some more gyrations with this, with an earlier version of the firmware, and I'm not sure if it was the ASIair or the AVX, but you used to have to do some manual stuff first and move it X amount of degrees, but you don't have to do that anymore. Just hit Quick Sync and it works. So for preparation, it tells you exactly, when you select PA or polar alignment, it gives you a set of instructions on what to do. So as long as you're sitting there and hitting polar alignment at due face north, then all you have to do is hit the little play button and you go to the next slide. And then it's gone through and it's gone through the whole calculations in terms of plate solving and so forth. And then you hit the let's go button. And a little target shows up. The green dot is where you want to be. The yellow dot is where you're at currently based on your altitude and azimuth settings. And one thing I found, and this took me a few months of doing polar alignment to figure this whole thing out, but it's relatively straightforward. When you're facing the rear of the mount, there are two knobs. Those are your azimuth knobs, I believe they're called. And then you have your back knob, which is for your altitude. If it's pointing on the lower section where it says 2657, if it's pointing to the right, that means you have to adjust your right knob. So you basically have to adjust the opposite knob to allow you to move the knob, and then you move it a couple, like a crank or so, and then it'll refresh. When you refresh it, it'll refresh your actual screen and it'll show whether you're closer to the target or not. And then once you get the feeling of how to work it with your scope and with your mount, each mount's different in terms of its sensitivity and how it works. It's pretty easy to work with. It takes me typically, if I'm setting up my rig for the night and I've already had it tucked away in the house and I'm setting it up all new again, it might take me 5 minutes to 10 minutes to set the thing up properly. And if I keep the rig set up night to night, maybe put a cover on the scope and everything to protect it. If I have to do a repolar alignment, it's very minimal. It might take me just 5 minutes and you're ready to go. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so now at this point, we are well below 5. If you're below 5 or below in terms of your total error, it's going to give you a nice little smiley face. And when you hit the finish, it puts a little gamification in there, and it has little fireworks that appear to tell you that you've done a good thing and you're all polar aligned. You can settle for anything that's below 5. But I find if I go for 0.5 or below on my total error, my guiding is much more accurate. Okay.
All right. And on Nina has no native polar alignment tool. There is a plugin, which I've depicted here, a 3-point polar alignment plugin that allows you to point the scope anywhere in the sky. It'll take 3 images, 10 degrees apart. It'll then give you your error, and you can make the adjustments in altitude and azimuth. Honestly, I've never gotten it to work, and that's probably me. I use SharpCap. I find it, I can see Polaris. I find it very easy and quick to use. I have sometimes played with PhD2's drift alignment, which is like watching paint dry. I'm a setup and takedown person like Dave. Sometimes I can leave it out for a few nights, but on a permanent pier, I would drift a line and spend a night doing that right. But I don't have that. But with SharpCap, within a couple of minutes, I can get my polar alignment done. Auto focusing.
Well, yes. So that, look, why don't you go back one screen just real quick? Okay, so this is my electronic autofocuser, and the way I have this set up, Star Arizona has, if you have a C8 or any C-type OTA, could be a 9.25, whatever it might be, that's capable of doing visual imaging, or visual as well as imaging. They have a bracket that you can attach, they'll attach it for you if you want. I had them install it. And this allows me to use the electronic autofocuser without having to take it off every time I want to use it for visual. If you don't have this type of a bracket, you would actually have to uninstall the AF in order to use the knob to use it for visual versus imaging. So basically how this works is there's a little knob there. If you tighten it, then the EAF will control it through your ASIAir in this case.
Nice.
And if you loosen it and you're doing a night of visual, which I rarely do, then you can adjust the focus for that. So that's called a quick switch. I highly recommend it if you have a Celestron SCT. And go to the next screen. Okay, so this is auto focusing throughout the ASIAir. The only caveat is that I highly recommend is that you can also do manual focusing through this. Through the air itself. You don't need to be outside handling the focus knob. You can actually set it up, and if you see that it's having trouble doing what's called a curve for your focus, for your V curve to calculate it, that means that your manual focus needs to be focused a little bit better so that the AF can pick it up. It's kind of like using a camera. If you take your lens and you manually focus it, you get it totally out of focus, and then you try to use autofocus through a DSLR or mirrorless camera, it's not going to be able to focus. You have to get it relatively close so it can see what the object is. So same case with the ASIAir and with your EAF, make sure you're not seeing these large donuts in the screen. You can easily manually focus. But once you have it set, it's fairly easy to work with, and it will plot out a graph. And if you go to the next slide, then it's your screen.
No, that is the next slide.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead.
So Nina is very similar. Certainly, it's the same in the sense that if you're way off on the focus, Nina you'll get a horizontal line for the autofocus, and it'll give you an error message. It's making steps in my case of about 36 microns at a time. So if I'm a couple millimeters off of the focus, it's not gonna get there. The curve, typical autofocus curve, is on the left, and some data that comes with it. This is the configuration screen for autofocus. I don't know whether you can read any of this, but this area here are the parameters you can set. How many offset steps? What will your offset step size be? In my case, it's 60. How many offset steps at the beginning? I've got 4. Your focuser may vary. How many times you want to retry if it fails? What's your R² threshold for the accuracy of the hyperbola that it creates? And then down at the bottom is the autofocus setting. It allows you to pick one filter to be your autofocus filter, and then it calculates the autofocus offset for every other filter. And then as you change filters in your filter wheel, it simply moves them.
Okay, so this is the Sky Atlas and the ASIAir. It's one of those things you can use, very similar to what they have in the smart telescopes, the C-Star, the S50, as well as the S30. It's the same type of it's a similar application. But, there have been times where I wasn't sure what I was going to image that night. So I go into tonight's best and I kind of scroll through it. And I look at the object, do I want to shoot that or not? And if so, where is it going to be in the night sky, in the military time format? Obviously the best objects are typically the ones that start out low and then go up and then go down, so you can have the most imaging time. And it also shows you the direction. I can see north, east, and south without a problem. But if it's a western sky object and it's lower in the horizon, my house will block it from my patio. So unless it's relatively high in the sky, I'm not going to be able to see it. But it's just a good way to see what's out there. And if you decide to click on the actual object itself in a preview mode, it'll allow you to slew to the object and preview it, so you can see how it's framed up and then decide whether you're going to image or not.
So Dave, let me pose a question to you. I see a magnifying glass, a search icon in the upper right. Does
Yes.
that search only through tonight's best, or does that allow you to search through the entire database?
Oh, no.
You wanna
The tonight's
target an image
best
that is
was,
not-
if you see the 3 hash marks on the top, that's a menu option. So you could say, I want to see tonight's best, or maybe I want to see all IC objects, or
Okay.
other NGC
So
objects.
this is a much more robust atlas than just a list
Yeah.
of the best.
Yeah, you can use the query tool or the magnifying glass, and you could type in, I want to see, M51, and it'll take you right to M51. And then here's another option you have where you can actually see a image of what the object will look in the night sky with your particular camera. So based on whether it's a 2600 MC Pro or a 533 or a full-size frame camera, it will show you how it's going to be framed. And in my case, I'll use this to mainly see, whether I want to rotate the camera or not. And I can do that with the Hyperstar connector just by loosening a few knobs strictly for the camera to get it in the proper orientation. And then I'll see when I do a preview again what it looks like. But this is going to be an idea to preview what's in the frame. You can go to it using the Go To button, and it will slew, once you're polar aligned, it'll slew you directly to that object. You can shoot what's called mosaic mode, where you just click on that, and then that will allow you to determine how many frames you want, what size, and so forth. So there's a lot of things you could do on this screen. And for setting up your plan for your sequence and there's a few things we probably skip because we're not getting into a lot of detail here, but when you're setting up a plan, let's say I want to shoot the Heart Nebula, IC 1805 in this case. I'm going to choose how many exposures. You could choose a filter if you want as well, especially if you're using a filter wheel. But since I'm not using a filter wheel, I just have a filter drawer that I'm using. That's not applicable. You can go with the standard default gain, or you could type in the gain, whether it's 100 or 200, whatever it might be. And then you can determine how many exposures you want. So that where it says EXP or exposures, that means 300 seconds. And then you want to repeat it 10 times, 20 times, 200 times, whatever it might be. And then you select OK. And on the right side, you can give the plan a name. You could choose whether you're going to use auto guiding, whether you want to do an automatic meridian flip, whether you want the cooling to be on for the camera or not, when you want the plan to start, when you want it to end. I'll typically set mine to ending at astronomical daylight. And then at that point, once the plan has ended, do you want it to turn off the cooler from the camera? Do you want it to go to the home position? And whether you want the EAF to go back to the 0 position, which I typically do not set for that, and whether you want to shut down the ASIAir, which I do not set. I keep those off. And that's preparing the plan. And then at that point, you have the option in what's called the Sky Atlas mode, which is the mode we're in right now. You can actually reframe the object. So maybe you don't like the way it's set. You want to move it to the right or left in this case. You can do that. You cannot rotate it. If you want to rotate it, at least in my case, I don't have a camera rotator. It's not possible with my configuration. I had to physically go out there and rotate the camera either horizontally or vertically, or move it anywhere I want. And then I can reframe it as I want to. And then once you do that, then it'll salute to that particular target. And in the bottom left of the screen is an actual screenshot of my own that I took a while back. This shows the previous plans I've set up. So, let's say I shot a bunch of subs for M51 during Galaxy season. And then next year I want to come back and I want to shoot the same object again with the same location. I could do that, and assuming I save my subs, I can go ahead and stack additional subs with it and then process it from there. Then the next step is guiding calibration. So you can either start guiding calibration when you're already set up and you're synced with the object itself, but there are some cases where it might tell you, and I've had this happen on a few occasions, that you're too low in the horizon to do the calibration. You should set it up with a deck setting of 30 or more, for example. So then what I'll typically do is I'll select a star and I'll go to that particular star that's in a star field that has a deck of 30 plus or more at that point in the night. And then I'll do my calibration. Then I'll go back to the actual object and I can start my plan at that point. But guiding calibration is important. If you're doing guiding and you have a guide camera and a guide scope of some sort, you want to do that up front before you start the actual plan itself.
Just as a contrary opinion, I calibrate periodically, but as long as I don't touch my guide camera or my guide scope, I don't recalibrate.
Yeah, and that's an option I have with the ASIAir as well. I can save it and not to go through this step, but typically this step takes like maybe 5 minutes, and I'll just go ahead and do it.
Doesn't take long.
Yeah. So at this point, I just hit the start button, which is where it has a little double hash marks, and then it'll salute the object, it'll start the plan. And on this particular screen, it shows me everything that I need to see when I'm doing an imaging session. It'll show me the actual guiding itself and how well it's doing. There is a histogram on the bottom of the screen. They call it a histogram. And all this allows you to do is to adjust your black levels and your lighter levels, and it gives you an idea to, view that image as if you were processing it in a stretch. Let's say you're using PixInsight or whatever. It just gives you an easier way to review it. It does provide you to be able to detect the stars if you want, or to annotate it. It has a little cross section there, and that's typically if you want to do some collimation or something, you can do that as well. I rarely use that. You can always go back to the Sky Atlas. It gives you some additional information, which I don't really use a lot. It shows you the min, max, the average, the standard. Just shows you how your exposures are doing at that point. And then it tells you, you might have several targets set up for that evening. I'm typically focusing on one, but it'll show you of the 200 exposures, how many exposures you took. And then you can go from there.
So now we'll go through similar functions within NINA. This is an image of the NINA Atlas. There is a search engine over here, which I find reasonably functional. You can type in a particular target. If you know you're shooting M31 tonight, you type M31 and click search, and it brings it right up. Here I've set it up to show me open clusters in Perseus. So I don't know if you can read that, but that's open clusters, that's Perseus. And it populates images from sky surveys. It also shows you what the path of the object will be through that night. And then you can add this target to your sequence. You can send it to the framing tool, or you can just slew directly to it. And then there's also some data down here about the status of the moon. And if you've searched a large number of objects, there can be multiple pages to scroll through. Here's the framing tool. So we were in Perseus. I selected Ancient Chi Persei. It brings it over to the framing tool, and it loads it up. You can vary the field of view. I have it set for 2 degrees because that nicely frames my camera frame, which is depicted here. It's got details on my camera, which in this case is a 183 mm. It allows me to set up mosaics, add horizontal panels, add vertical panels. And then I can, again, slew and center, add to the sequence. I can also just save a target. So if it's a full moon night and I just want to pick targets, I can get them centered and rotated exactly the way I want them and save them into NINA. And then I can just drag and drop them into a sequence later on. So here is a part of one of my imaging plans. And what I highlight for you, the program itself, the sequence is here, and over here are the instructions. Now you can see from the size of the slide bar that the total number of instructions is 5 or 6 times the number that are visible here. And there's stuff for dome control and safety monitor control and things I don't have. So you can minimize those. But it's as simple as clicking something, switch filter, and dragging it to the place you want it to go in your program. Oops, didn't mean to do that, sorry. One nice feature about NINA is even when you started the sequence, and you start it by clicking the run button down here, if I change my mind about something and the sequence has not yet reached that point, I don't have to stop the sequence. I can drag a new command in there. I can delete a command. You can turn commands on and off. So let me just show you what I've got here. This is my module for startup and equipment check. So what do I do? At the beginning of the evening, cool the camera, and I set the focuser to the initial position that I think the autofocus will run from. I have this set up. One feature allows me to send messages from NINA to an app on my phone called Pushover. So when it's time to remove the lens caps, my phone dings. I can be sitting in the house and it says, please remove the lens caps. So I go outside and do that. I wait until the sun is 7.2 degrees below the horizon. Unpark, set the tracking to sidereal, slew to a clear spot in the sky, run autofocus, slew back to the North Pole, send me a message saying ready for polar alignment, and then I have a command that tells it to wait indefinitely. So that allows me to go outside, start up SharpCap, do my polar alignment, finish that. I also take the opportunity to do my rotation. I do not have an electronic focuser, so I am my my rotator. I'm the rotator on my system, so if I have to rotate the camera, I've got to do that. And there's a tool that says, you know, you want to be at 259 degrees, you need to move it 11 degrees clockwise and back and forth. When I am done, this wait indefinitely button, when it's active, will have a stop button in the middle of it. Whenever I'm done, I click the stop button and it goes on to the next command, which in this case is to create an all sky model. That's an astrophysics tool that integrates directly with the astrophysics control software. I've got all my parameters for it saved in Nina, and it just sets up the sequence and runs it. And then it goes on into beginning imaging. I failed to include a screen of the dashboard that I can look at that shows the last image that was taken, the image history, where I am in the sequence, what the temperature is, where the focuser is, what the camera temp is, and what the guiding is looking like, all in a single screen, which is kind of nice. But this is the guiding screen. Again, like the other screens, there are parameters you can set here. Any slightly lighter gray box means it's an option for you. And it's fully integrated with PhD2. Like I said, it just calls PhD2, and I can go into the brain and set any algorithm, you know, any tweaks, algorithms. I can run the guiding assistant, change the min-max, change the aggressiveness, anything I might need to do over the course of an evening. Calibration frames, I think this title should have been further up. So did you want to say anything else about calibration frames, Dave?
Yeah, actually, I used to buy calibration frames
Oh, that's right.
the way. This is when I was shooting in Galaxy season mode, had my image train on the back, and I would just take my light pad and a little knit screen thing with the t-shirt thing just to do my calibration. And then Dean from Star Arizona said, you really shouldn't be doing your calibration frames in the morning. You should do them in the evening just before you do your session, because the light will reflect on your patio and it will go back up. Now, not necessarily in this case, but if I'm using my Hyperstar and I have my dew shield attached to the scope so that I can actually fit the flat panel on it, it can actually get through any openings in that dew shield that let in light and affect your exposures. So typically I do this now during the evening. And if you can go to the next frame. The ASIAir makes it very easy to set up your bias frames, flats, or darks. I used to do dark frames and darks for flats and flat frames. And then I finally discovered how you could just set up a master bias for darks as well as for flats. So typically that's what I'm doing. And I'll set up flats for that evening, assuming I haven't changed anything. If I change something on the configuration, like a filter or something, I will definitely do another set of flats. But here you just select the type of exposure or calibration frame you want to create. You'll tell it how you want your exposure to be set. I just set it in auto mode. I'll set my gain to my camera's gain of 100. And typically I'm shooting 30 exposures in bin 1. And especially for flat frames, it's extremely easy. I'll just hit OK. Then I'll go into the next, I don't know if it's in the next slide or not. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and run in what's called auto run sequence. I'll click on the little button there and it will automatically determine the exposures. And here's an example of a flat frame using the actual histogram If, as long as I see that that histogram is relatively close to being in the middle of the screen, that means I have a decent flat screen, screen that I've calculated.
And in Nina, flats are done with a tool called a Flat Wizard. You set how many flats you want to take, darks if you need them. The 183, you do need darks. When I use a 2600, I set this to 0. Command to slew to the zenith. I have a refractor. I use a cheap light board tracing panel like Dave does for the flats, and that works well. You have single mode where you pick whatever filter you want, and the settings are very similar to what Dave just showed for the air. Binning, gain, offset. And then you can set a minimum and maximum exposure. It has an algorithm where it will start at the 50% point. So here I basically have 0 and 4 seconds. So it'll take an exposure at about just a touch over 2 seconds. If that falls into the desired range, I'm aiming for a peak of 40% of the histogram with a 10% range on either side. So anything with the peak of the histogram between 23,500, 28,800 will be good. If it's too high, it'll cut the exposure in half, and this is all automatic, and it'll keep going up or down until it finds the right exposure. It also has a multi-mode. I've got a 7 filter wheel, so I've got LRGB and show. Some nights I'm doing show on one target and LRGB on another, so I need flats on all 7 filters. And I can set this up, and it just goes through one after the other after the other. And it stops and it says, okay, that's fine, got that done. Now cover your scope so I can take the darks, and it takes the darks. For dark frames, you can use the sequencer that I showed you a moment ago, and I do have a sequence for dark frames. I just find it simpler to use what Nina calls its legacy sequencer. This is the original sequencer Nina created. You could cool the camera and unpark the mount and indicate whether you would have a meridian flip. And at the end, you could warm the camera and park the mount. You identify the target. You identify how many exposures are lights, darks, how many exposure, what the exposure time is, and you click run. I just find it really simple to set up darks when I need them in the simple or the legacy sequencer. And my darks, I tip, the flat darks are already done, as I've already shown you. When I need to do darks, I do a dark library, and I just do it on a moon-filled night in my garage. So there we have the overview, and we're happy to take questions. And if appropriate, we can pull up our live screens and show you things we haven't addressed.
If I could make a comment.
Sure.
Actually, two maybe. First of all, Starzona has now provided me a bracket for an automatic focuser for a 14-inch Celestron. So they can create it if you need it.
Absolutely.
And they are wonderful at doing so.
Yeah, they're like Tucson's version of Precise Parts.
I think I'll leave it at that. The other thing I was going to say, which really didn't get any discussion, but ASIAir has a portion of programming called Plan. You could basically go set it up to take the image of whatever you want, at whatever settings you want, and set it up to go and turn on at 2 or 3 hours later, and you've got it all set up. You turn it on, it's good to go. You don't have to do anything with it. You can go to bed, wake up in the morning, take out the USB stick and process it.
Yeah, you can do that. I haven't gotten the guts to do that yet. I've been brave enough to do it. I just basically look what I can shoot starting now to get the maximum number of subs for the evening. But then once I get everything polar aligned, I'm inside the house at that point and get everything set up. And then my wife and I are ready to watch the Golden Bachelorette or whatever else is on TV. Any sort of reality show we're watching that evening, we're ready to go.
This is Craig. I use the plan mode quite a bit, but here's a difference between, and I have Nina too, so I use the two. I use the ASIAir a lot more than I use Nina, only because I know how the ASIAir works. That's where I started. So I'm still learning Nina. But the one thing that really is attractive with Nina in its what I'll call plan mode, which is the advanced sequencer, is the ability to say when you want to move to the next object. I have things that I want to do the first part of the evening and then other objects the second part, and I may say at 12:30 at night I want to move to the second object. In ASIAir, you kind of have to guess at that, and it usually always means I have to manually stop the plan, uh, say that I'm done with the first object, because you're trying to calculate how many times is it going to, focus. How long is it going to take for dithering to settle? And you just can't do that in the
Right.
ASIAir. So the one thing where Nina really shines in that area is if you've got kind of specific times where you want to move to the next object, it'll do it. And the other thing that it shines, and I think Jeff was getting at, is in the autofocuser, you can set a change in the HFR. It'll track from every image what the star size is, and when it changes by more than, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 15%, you decide what you want to set it at. It will autofocus instead of just having this blind every half hour or every hour, whether that's accurate or not. So I find that piece to be really nice too.
But just if I
That's the
can
big
add to
difference
that, Craig,
between
the autofocusing, you can autofocus based on HFR change, you can autofocus based on time, you can autofocus based on temperature change. If temperature changes more than 1 degree Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, depending on your rig. It's just an example of the variety of options you have for programming. You can also program
the
not to
ASIAir
say,
does
yeah,
have
go ahead.
the temperature change and the it gives you like a half hour, an hour, and I don't remember what else. I think that's it, a half hour, an hour, if you want to do time based. I've never gone beyond an hour if that's an option. So it's got two of them, but it doesn't have the HFR change. And I've run into definitely situations where that I would rather use the HFR change.
Yeah. For me with the ASIAir, I just set it to do autofocus, redo it autofocus every 30 minutes. So it's going to go ahead and refocus it every 30 minutes. And that's about the extent of it. And then when I do a meridian flip, I'll have it go ahead and redo calibration for guiding. I found that I have a lot less frames that I have to get rid of when I go through Blink in PixInsight if I do another calibration once it does the meridian flip.
The other thing, Dave, I wanted to mention to you is you mentioned, well, I didn't have to buy a Windows PC. If you ever decided that you wanted to go to Nina in the future, you do have to buy something similar to the ASIAir. You got to buy like a Melee PC that runs Windows, but it's only 250 bucks. So it's about the price of the ASIAir. But to connect to it, you can connect to it from your Mac, you can connect to it from a tablet, you just RDP into it, and all those platforms have got a remote desktop.
Actually, there's software called Parallels that you can run on a Mac that will give you an IBM interface.
He doesn't need, Parallels, that gives you an IBM.
Yeah,
That gives you a
Windows
Microsoft, complete Microsoft installation. You don't need that.
So I just went through I thought my laptop had died and was starting to shop for a new one. And I thought, well, maybe I could get a Mac. I've been a Windows person all my life. When I really dove into Parallels, I learned that it doesn't necessarily handle RDP the same way a native Windows install did. And since that's the fundamental thing I do with my laptop, that squelched the Mac idea for me. Turned out I was able to get the laptop fixed, so it was.
You can
moved.
run RDP on your Mac, truthfully. Microsoft has RDP for Mac.
Yeah, you can, but it doesn't have the same functionality that a Windows PC has. For example, you can't drag and drop in RDP. It's just not a functionality of the Mac flavor.
What is RDP?
Remote desktop protocol. So that's the
Okay.
Windows protocol for connecting one Windows, taking remote control of another Windows computer.
Yeah.
I chose the ASIair personally because I'm on a Mac and I was looking for an option. I actually installed Nina on my old Mac Mini because that's the Intel machine. So I installed Windows on it to try it all out. But I felt that starting with it was a little overwhelming, and ASIair seemed like an easy option. At the same time, right now I'm experimenting with something called Indigo Sky. And it's basically it runs on Raspberry Pi, and so you can throw it along with your
Right.
rig outside, and then you can run their application remotely from a Mac, and they also have a Windows client as well. So, but I'm still experimenting with it. It's very featured like Nina is, so it'll obviously take a long time to play around with. On the ASIair, I do like the plan thing because I have tried, and I mean, on the plan, when you set up your details in the plan, it'll give you a kind of a estimated time for the plan to get over, right? Like for say, if I'm taking 100 frames of particular object, I know when it'll get over, but at the same time, I'm going to wait for something to come up on the sky, get up to 45 degrees. I look it all up in the plan, and then I set the time, like, okay, keep these many hours or minutes between these two sessions. So I may have done, say, play this earlier in the day, and then I'm waiting for M42 to show up, which will be way later in the night, which I did recently, actually. And I set up the number of minutes between those minutes or hours before the second session starts. It worked pretty well for me, and I went to sleep. My wife wakes up for work at 4 a.m., so I wake up with her.
How did you set on ASIair a gap in between the two different objects?
Yeah, it's in the ASIair. There's a setting. I don't have my rig up right now. I'm making some changes right now, so otherwise I could share my screen. And yeah, it's when you go into the plan mode, you have an option between each plan, the duration, when to start. So on ASIair, on the left-hand side, you'll see when to start the plan, and then you can select how many minutes to wait. Minutes or hours, whatever you want to choose. The other thing I really like about ASIair is sometimes it's like I may have selected a part of the like I sometimes move my camera position to some other part of the image, and then I took a shot of it and I left it there, left it in my preview, and then later on I want to go back to the same location. ASIair gives you an option to choose that position. So
you actually raised one very good point that I failed to note in the talk earlier. Nina is a Windows platform. They have not ported it to Linux or to Mac.
Yeah.
And I doubt they ever will, given that it's basically a group of volunteers.
That's true.
I have a question on a different side of the topic. And that's both of these applications, ASIair and Nina, use PhD essentially for their guiding.
Right.
One of the things that I miss is being able to use the PhD log viewer. I have not found any way it's supposed to be there, of finding the logs in ASIair that would be compatible with that. So question number one for David is, do you know of a way of finding those logs? or for Jeff, does Nina have a way of finding those logs?
So with Nina, the logs are in the PhD2 folder, just like they would be if you were running PhD2 without it. And I go to the logs regularly.
Yeah, for the
I don't
ASI,
remember the path off the top of my head, but they're absolutely there.
there is a log file. If you go into the image management section, there is a separate folder for log files. And then you can go ahead and look throughout the whole sequence of events that happen throughout the night.
Yeah, for some reason though, yeah, I've done that. I've been, the only thing it tells me is when it turns on and when it turns off.
Well, it gives you some more detailed image. It'll tell you that, it shot sub number 100 out of your sequence, and then it'll tell you when it went ahead to do an autofocus sequence, to do another V curve.
I see. Yeah, Dave, what Alan is asking, the PhD2 keeps its own log, second by second. What's
Oh,
the
I got you.
declination? So you can take, I want to know what was my root mean square error between 1:11 a.m. and 2:22. And there's a log viewer, you can see that.
Yeah, ASIAir does not do that. It's using a subset of PH2, so it's not going to probably have
No, Dave, it does. I don't know where it stores it. I know it does create logs. I've heard of people downloading them. I think you have to get to them. I think you actually have to use like the USB connection on the side, the USB-C. You know how you download things where you can get to different directories.
Yeah.
I have never gone looking for them, so I don't know where they are, but they do exist. People have downloaded them and played them back through PhD to get statistics.
Okay.
Actually, the logs are saved in the logs folder. So if you're using a SD card and to dump everything, you can dump the whole data from if you're capturing direct to ASIAir and then use image management to move all the data, you can also take that and put it in your computer, and then you get the PhD logs out there. So I have seen the logs. I haven't played it back in PhD. Now that you say so, I'll do that. I'm now curious about it, and good learning for me. Thank you.
I'll
Yeah, we have
try
time for
that,
maybe
for
one
the
more
C
question.
connection. But
I have a quick
typically
question.
what I do is load it onto, I save everything to the SD card. And then when I'm done, I stick a USB connection that I have to a solid state miniature drive, and I transfer everything onto that, and then bring it up and plug it into my computer. But I've never been able to get to the true logs that have the kind of detail that you would need to run it through the PhD log viewer.
Alan, why don't you post the question into either the Discord channel or the group's IO chat, and maybe Craig can help point you in the right direction to that folder. Gina, you had a question.
Yeah, and maybe it's not relevant to the systems, but if there are any of you that have used both systems, it'd be interesting to know. I read somewhere that for planetary, the ASIAir Plus isn't that you can't achieve the same frames per second that you can with like using a separate system with Nina using the same camera. Is there any merit to that, or is that something totally unrelated?
I wouldn't use Nina for planetary either.
Okay.
In theory, you can do it, but it's a lot more intuitive to use fire capture or sharp cap or something like. When I shoot the moon, or my rig won't do planets, but when I shoot the moon, I use sharp cap.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we've run pretty long tonight, but that's okay. And our next meeting will be the third Monday of December, which is December 16th. And don't forget, as Jeff mentioned, the last day for entering your images into the imaging contest is midnight on December 15th. So thank you all for the good questions, and I'll try to post this recording of our meeting sometime tomorrow.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.